Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to learn a bit more about some funders that you may not yet have met, or learn more about them if you've met them previously. My name is Karen Pelto, and I coordinate the Berkshire Funding Focus Initiative, which very briefly helps folks in Berkshire County become aware of and more competitive for funding. And so I'm pleased today to be able to convene a terrific panel of folks. The way today will work is that I will start with a couple of warm-up questions, and then I will open it up to the group. When we get to the open conversation, you can certainly feel free to put something in the chat, but I will also look for your raised hand, and I'll try my best to keep track of both aspects of things. I'm going to kick us off by asking each of our panelists in turn to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their organization and the focus of their philanthropy efforts. And I'll start with Vanessa.
Great. Thanks so much, Karen. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here. This is Vanessa Plant. I'm the executive director of the Alcu Foundation. We're based just outside of Boston, although we fund statewide. We're a private family foundation, and we have two areas of focus. One of them is youth development, and the other one is supporting organization that helps women with provides support to women around equity and safety. So those are kind of our two areas. We work with smaller organizations that have budgets under typically 2.5 million. And yeah, I'll leave it at there. Back to you, Karen.
Great. Sarah, would you like to share?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Coffrin Walsh. I'm the executive director of the Homestead Foundation. We are also a small private family foundation, and we fund in the geographic areas where we have family and trustees, which is Greater Atlanta area, Greater Boston area, and Western Massachusetts. We also fund organizations with organizational budgets under 3 million. And but other than that, our topic areas are relatively broad. We fund in the arts, environment, health, social services, journalism, legal and criminal justice, racial and social justice, and youth development.
Great. And Samalid, if you would share with us, that would be wonderful.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Samalit Hogan. I'm from Boston Impact Initiative. We are an impact investor, a nonprofit impact investing fund, and certified CDFI, that's a community development financing institution. We are dedicated to building community ownership, shared wealth, and economic power, particularly in communities of color. Our philanthropic focus is guided by values of equity, solidarity, mutuality, and localism. And we invest in entrepreneurs that are building impact-driven businesses or organizations, such as nonprofits. And we also have a a program that helps other emerging fund managers learn what we do so they can do the same in other areas of the country. In my role with the organization, I'm the director of business support services, and we provide business coaching as part of our involvement with the organizations that we invest in because we are a trust-based lender or CDFI. Most we do not look at credit scores or anything like that. We look for impact in the community. That's our primary goal to see how the organization is impacting the community. Our investments start $100,000. They can go up to $1 million. But similar to other lenders, we do look for cash flow assets. We do not necessarily do grants like the other foundations in the room today, but we're definitely very involved in investing in nonprofit organizations that are either building community-owned real estate or resilient communities. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And I'll keep going in the same order just to keep myself organized. And I'll ask each of you to talk about what trends you're seeing as funders. And so, Vanessa, if you'd like to kick us off.
Sure. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, and often when I think of trends, I think of good things happening, and this is maybe not that. But I feel like there is a very high level of turnover right now among the nonprofits that we support. We're seeing and hearing just a lot of burnout. I think just the general climate and budget cuts and a lot of folks working kind of over capacity and trying to provide more programming, especially as we serve organizations that work with youth and women. So we're seeing a lot of that. We're trying to be responsive to it and trying to kind of move our funding a little bit to help support some of those issues. But that's kind of the big one that we're seeing here at the Alku Foundation.
Great, thank you. Sarah, I invite you to share as well.
Sure. I think that some of the trends I've been seeing, also not necessarily on the positive side, are that that as federal funding and other sources of funding have shifted, that there's more competition for funding out there. We're certainly seeing a dramatic increase in the number of applications we're receiving, and I've heard that kind of across the board in other foundations as well. That there's also just an increased need, obviously, of the people that nonprofits are serving. Um, I think that in terms of some encouraging trends, I think in on the philanthropy side, I definitely think there's a growth in discussion around trust-based philanthropy, doing more general operating support, multi-year funding. I think those things are being discussed and being moved forward more than they have in the past, and that is encouraging as well.
Great, thanks. Samilit?
Yes, I would agree with Sarah, especially on and Sarah and Vanessa on those points. Definitely, in addition to working for BII, I sit on 4 different nonprofit boards, and they're increasingly seeking for long-term operational support, not just one-time off project grants, so multi-year grants. Because we need to invest in infrastructure, staff development, strategic planning, and setting up operational systems that can help us, go the long haul and avoid burnout of the staff. And also, what I've seen is that some nonprofits are collaborating more across sectors, sharing resources, for example, co-locating in offices, sharing some actual physical spaces, or co-delivering services to be able to achieve deeper impact with lowering the cost. Um, and even sharing back office support functions. So I've seen that happen successfully. It's hard to do, but I've seen it happen. So that's something that, given the current state of the funding environment, they've had to do. And I think prioritizing leadership and accountability to the communities they serve is another big trend. I've seen nonprofits build community advisory boards. BII has several boards that we are accountable to, of folks that are made up of our communities that we served, and um, adapting to like more culturally responsive approaches by including more people of color and voices in those boards.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. The next question I'll ask sort of, I guess, responds to or helps you respond to the increase in demand on your resources, which is tips you could offer applicants, um, either mistakes you don't want to see again or things that are pluses that you look for to make sure that the applications you actually get are in alignment with what you actually want to fund, so that it helps the applicant, and it also helps the funder to make sure that you're getting what you actually want to see. And so I'll start with Vanessa.
Great. So we practice trust-based philanthropy and we don't actually have an application process. So the funding process is really strongly based on relationships. So we ask folks to reach out through our website or email me directly, and I then do my research, pull 990s. I often look at GuideStar, look on websites, make sure that you're aligned with what we're looking for. And then from there, schedule usually a 30 to an hour long introductory call. And then from there, it's really about investing in the leaders of the organization for us and understanding your work. So it's not so much about receiving an application, what we can do for that. I think it's really important whether the funder is doing trust-based philanthropy or not, is to try to connect with the funder to make sure that you are aligned before submitting blindly. I've been on the other side of it where I did fundraising for 20 years, and I know how frustrating it is to just be sending in applications and never hearing anything back or being rejected and just, trying to figure out why. And sometimes the funder's priorities just are not clearly stated on the RFP or on the website. So having a 20-minute conversation before applying so that you can be top of mind. You can make sure you're, laying out your application in a way that is makes sense to them is always really helpful. And then for things that I think, I forget the way you phrased it, Karen, but things that kind of like mistakes or something. A lot of people spell our foundation name incorrectly, and it's the Alku Foundation, which I know no one would ever know, but sometimes people write to us, the ACLU, foundation, or, just kind of mix all the letters up. It's never going to ding someone. We're never going to not fund someone because of that. But I think, sometimes when I see that, I'm like, it's in my signature. So I think just kind of paying attention to detail is always a really helpful thing.
Great. Yes, I always tell people, read, 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 read. Pay attention. So, Sarah, what would you like to add or share?
Yeah, I really concur with what everything Vanessa said. Like, we do have a more traditional grant process, and we try to be as transparent with that process on our website as we can. But so just taking, yeah, that moment to make sure that you are aligned and not just kind of trying to shoehorn yourself into somebody's guidelines. It's usually pretty apparent when that is the case. And we just don't want to waste your time or our time. It's a matter of making sure that we can have natural alignment. And I know it's kind of cutthroat out there, but still, you don't want to be wasting anybody's time. So that's the most part.
Great. So, Lee, do you want to
Sure.
share?
Of course. So, similar to Vanessa, we don't have an actual application on our website. What we have is an interest form. We are trust-based lenders, so our investment and by the way, I should say we don't just do loans. We have this concept called integrated capital. So there's recoverable grants, there's royalty financing, there's a lot of different types of structures that we have found, even equity, safe notes, convertible notes, like there's all these different things, right? Maybe those are not appropriate for nonprofits, but I just wanted you all to know that we don't just look at one size fits all in terms of our investments. But we look beyond financials. So tips that I can provide to you is, clearly articulate who benefits from your work. You already know that. How your organization builds on community ownership, shared wealth, or economic power, and why your approach or your mission matters to the community that you serve. Also, you don't have to be perfect. If you're still developing, your plans, your strategic plans, or your internally your whatever project that you're working on, we can provide some support, advising, or connections that may be helpful in helping you sort of get to the point where you have a really good clarity on what is it that you're looking for, what you need. So we need to know, you need to be able to explain to us how this funding will definitely strengthen your organization long term, not just in the short term, just to plug in gaps. We're looking to help build resilient organizations. Um, so we do value that sort of information as to how the funding will be used to for that long-term growth. Um, and applicants or organizations that can show they have deep ties to the communities they serve really stand out. So and uh, and what else can I tell you? I think those are some of the biggest tips that I can give you.
Wonderful. Before I open it up, I do want to just follow up briefly, Vanessa, with something you mentioned, which is GuideStar. I want to mention this for two reasons. One is that BFF, Berkshire Funding Focus, is organizing a virtual workshop to be held later this spring with Candid and with Impala, so that nonprofits can understand what they are, why they're important, and what funders can see about them, and sort of, what, because I guess what I'd love, Vanessa, for you to speak to, since you mentioned GuideStar, is, even if a funder hasn't seen an application, a funder can see an awful lot about an organization and make decisions without the organization even knowing. So I'd love for you to speak to that briefly for the folks here, and also hope that they'll join the workshop later this spring.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we try to do a lot of the research kind of before talking so that I'm not asking, the nonprofit to pull financials and all those details. So at a glance, usually when I go on to GuideStar, it'll list your mission there. And there have been times where I get a request through our website to meet, and the mission is to serve, they say that they serve youth and their programs are youth focused and they do youth development, da, da. And then you go to the GuideStar website and it's just like we support families and the parents and we support direct service youth development organizations. And because we don't do all of our funding is general operating, it's unrestricted. We don't provide programmatic support. So if someone has a youth program within a larger scope program, then it wouldn't fit our guidelines. So I think sometimes seeing something like that, I'll respond to every email that comes through the website. So I won't just kind of write someone off and be like, man, but I think some funders will, if they're like, oh, they're not a fit, where, since GuideStar was updated, or since the GuideStar posting went live, like maybe that mission has changed or whatever that is. So I think it is important to kind of keep that updated. And then as long as an organization is bringing in a certain amount, they do have to file the 990, and I usually will pull that for last year. There's never been anything kind of shocking or surprising there. It's a tax document, so it's pretty straightforward. But if I do see, that an organization is raising 500,000 and then their expenses are 800,000, these are kind of things that will just trigger me to ask those questions. And same kind of goes for salaries. If an organization's making $500,000 and their one staff member is making half of that, I'm like, man, why are you doing that? Why aren't you hiring more people? And no judgment, just curious. And so I think kind of those pieces are just good information gathering pieces. So you do want to just make sure that they're updated and accurate for us to see.
Great, thank you so much. I'd love now to open it up for questions, and I hope I'll be able to see folks. If not, please, please feel free to raise your hand, or please feel free to put a question in the chat. Probably chat would be easier for me to see. Don't be shy, folks. This is your chance. Oh, Kristen. Yay.
Hi, thanks, Karen. Hearing that a confirmation that I think many of us are already aware of, that competition is increasing as federal funding and other funding sources are diminishing and being pulled out from under us, with organizations that have similar missions or similar impacts in their communities. How are you making decisions when you're fielding more requests than ever?
And feel free to jump in, any of you.
I can take a first crack at that. It's become more difficult. However, I think that the way we are evaluating um, applications hasn't really changed that much. One of the things that we've done as a foundation, we're not a spend down, but we have not always held ourselves to a strict 5%. And have been willing to go up to a 10% payout for the time being, and maybe who knows how long. But it's also a an acknowledgement that as a smaller family foundation, like we can't fill the whole gap, and that's heartbreaking on a lot of levels too. We acknowledge the increased need and funding issues, and we certainly take those things into consideration while we're evaluating, um, but we still have to kind of do what we can do, and that's why we do try to focus on those smaller organizations so that like the money that we can spend it goes farther. But yeah, it's a really hard time, and it's hard to see and to respond, and it's hard to say no, but unfortunately we have to do that some of the time.
Yeah. And Bart, I'll come to you in just a second. Stephanie asked a question in the chat that is very relevant to something Sarah just said, which is um, her foundation deciding at times to go above the percent that they would normally spend in a year, expend in a year. And so Stephanie's question, really to any and all of you, is how foundations are meeting, how you are meeting the expanded need right now, and what adjustments you've made internally to be able to do that. So I don't know if Vanessa and Samali, you wanted to address that, or Sarah, if you had more to say on that topic.
I'm happy to jump in. So we've increased as well our percentage of giving. The last 2 years we've increased it. We've also, like last year, I think, was a particularly difficult year for nonprofits just because there were so many unknowns as what was going to happen to funding. A lot of the organizations that we support lost funding through like AmeriCorps programs, and we're trying to figure out how to kind of meet those, bridge those gaps. We have what we try to bring on, we budget for new programs every year. At the beginning, the first 6 months of last year was difficult because I was like, we need to be a little bit more conservative with bringing on new programs and giving increases. We gave very few increases until we could better understand what was happening with those funding cuts with the different programs. But we do have a Catalyst Fund, which is a pocket of money that we hold to support existing grant partners. So if you're in our portfolio, we've been working with you for at least a year, you can apply for the Catalyst Fund, which is anywhere from 25 to 50,000 to meet an unmet gap or need or program or something. Originally, it was created to do, something not necessarily new, but to, fund a program. And last year we did have a lot of folks applying because they had budget gaps, because they lost staff, because they needed a, consultant, they needed to bring on something or do something more. So that's what this year's kind of similar. We were able to give some increases, so we feel like we're have a better understanding of what the landscape looks like, and feel a little bit more confident that a lot of those, unfortunately, a lot of programs were affected by the cuts. But I think that fear was really present last year. So we are kind of trying to operate a little bit more as usual and trying not to be as conservative with, increases or bringing on new programs.
Great.
So I would just add that similarly to what Vanessa said, we also have several nonprofits in our portfolio already. All in Energy is a Boston-based nonprofit working to accelerate inclusive clean energy transition for folks in low, moderate income communities. And Still We Rise is another one that's a mental health center providing culturally responsive therapy and others. So we would prioritize them asking for additional funding, but new nonprofits coming to us asking for funding, we would look at, what is your community impact? What is your organizational readiness and sustainability? In terms of funding availability, we raise the funds that we deploy from both uh, larger investors, institutional investors, and community investors. And we just finished raising a total of 22 million in 2025, but we've already deployed, I believe, 16 million of that. So we still have funds, obviously, to invest, and we'll continue to raise funds once those funds are, before those funds are used up. So I guess what I would encourage folks, if you are interested in reaching out to BII for funding, take a look at some of the portfolio companies, the nonprofits. Like I mentioned, I think we also invested Boston While Black, Zero Cooperative Care Academy, and others. And those are education. So we try not to have too much concentration in a particular area, such as mental health or education, but we will, so we're trying to diversify our portfolio. So, and that's a consideration for us.
Great, thanks. And Bart, you've been so patient. Please feel free to let us know what your question is.
What I was just interested in hearing from Sarah more about the Homestead Foundation's focus in Western Mass and Berkshire County, because they have it seems like they have a broad mission, but is there kind of a focus in Berkshire County, or has there been, and in Western Mass, kind of including Hampshire, Hamden, Franklin counties?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we don't differentiate our focus areas based on region. I will say that the trustee that lives in Western Mass has a specific interest in the environment. And so that's where I think we've started in that area a little bit more. But any organization that fits any of our other guideline categories from the Western Mass region is welcome to apply. Western Mass again has been our smallest geographic region. We in our last grant cycle, it was represented about 10% of our portfolio. So it is an area we have not had like as much funding in the past. But again, that's not necessarily purposeful or for any particular reason. It's just kind of how things have kind of come out. And we don't decline or have a turnover as much like based on region. Again, it's really kind of a case by case as things come in.
Great. I have a few questions in the chat. Marvin, who is with Westside Legends, which is a nonprofit in Pittsfield, Mass, asks, are you, the funders, do you overall base your grant awards on a merit-based system or predetermined criteria? In the government grant world, it's very clear and specified what the decision-making criteria are. So I think people are just asking for a little peek behind the curtain on this one. I don't know who would like to start.
I can start again. I think that for us, when we're considering proposals, we are really just looking for kind of that alignment on our priorities within each category. We do kind of have a racial and social justice lens throughout all of our work, and so organizations that embody some of that work, sometimes we are looking if we feel like we have too many and we have to call, then it might be looking at representation in leadership, representation on the board, things like that. But overall, we really do try to we have a relatively high response rate. Like again, last year we granted about 70% of the applications that came through, and so we really do try to respond to the need as we see it. But we don't have necessarily a merit-based or necessarily we have our own kind of priorities and just try to align as closely to that as we can.
Great, thanks. Do the other funders want to add anything to that?
I don't have much to add, but I can just say that, yeah, we have kind of criteria that we look at. It's a direct service, budgets need to be a certain size, certain things. And then it's really about understanding each other's work and figuring out if we're good partners for each other. So sometimes it's very easy. Sometimes it's like, oh my God, you fit everything and this is great. And here's a grant. And other times it's like, this isn't quite a fit. It's kind of, like, let's see if we can figure this out. Let's keep talking. Let's see how things evolve. But yeah, it's kind of, yeah, same as Sarah, neither one or the other, but a little bit of something else or a mix of all of them.
Okay. I'll move to the next questions about whether you collaborate with donor advised funds. And do you have any advice on how to find potential interested donors who have donor advised funds?
I'll jump in on
oh, go ahead.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, Sarah. No, I'll very quickly, that's a different area of the organization that I don't work on. Our CEO, Betty Francisco, is the primarily fundraiser in our organization. We actually are recipients of DAF's funds. And when in my conversations with her, um, you know, board members on the board of Boston Impact are usually like the strongest sort of allies and bridges to DAFs. And we look at local community foundations or institutional investors like Fidelity Charitable or Schwab or Vanguard Charitable, and those to kind of sort of reach out and see if there's an opportunity for them to invest in our funds so that we can reinvest that into the community. So we do that a lot through outreach through connections and relationships and folks in the community and our board members. Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, I actually also used to be on the fundraising side and grant writing, and unfortunately, DAFs are really functioning as individuals. It's really hard to kind of approach them in the same way as you do a grant. And I think that they have become kind of when you used to search for grants, would see all these family foundations that were like no unsolicited requests, no unsolicited requests. And they were really just families' personal giving vehicles. And that's basically what DAFs have become, is it's kind of like purposely, sorry, I've got a little bit of a cold, purposely not very transparent and not very easy to break into.
Thanks. And thanks for joining us, even though you're not 100%. Unfortunately, the next question is also for you, Sarah, but we'll wait a moment.
Yes, I saw that. Thank you.
Yep. Yep. And just for folks who maybe didn't see it in the chat, how the Homestead Foundation defines agricultural justice.
Yeah, I think we have supported organizations that are kind of bringing agricultural programs to people who have historically been kind of not supported in that area. So we look at organizations that are either trying to bring land back to indigenous peoples, or trying to build structures to bring agricultural supports to less supported communities.
Great, thank you. And I'll ask someone else to start the answers for Diane about specific deadlines. I know, Vanessa, you said that as trust-based, your door is there for folks to open at all times.
Yes. Yeah. We have no deadlines. We make decisions kind of on a monthly basis. So yeah, we try to work very quickly. But Yeah, we don't have any official deadlines or anything like we do for our Catalyst grant, but you need to be an existing grant recipient and partner in order to access that.
Great. And Sarah, I know you have a deadline coming soon.
Yes, so we have one grant cycle per year, and our deadline is March 15th. And again, I'll put our website in the chat, and our application process and guidelines are there.
Great, thanks. And Summalid, I would assume that similar to Vanessa, it's sort of always open for conversation.
Yes, yes, we are. You can fill the first step is it's always fill out an interest form. We review those twice every week, and we try to be responsive and getting back to you with any questions that we have and setting up a follow-up conversation.
Great. And Marvin at Westside Legends has a follow-up question for you in the chat about in terms of the loans. Are they at a reduced rate? Do you have forgivable loans? And just so everyone is aware, Westside Legends, one of their signature programs involves creating and renovating homes for folks in the west side of Pittsfield, which is a historically redlined neighborhood and really our most diverse neighborhood probably in the whole county.
Great. So, yes, so thank you for that question. We do get it a lot. So typically, our interest rates tend to be, I wouldn't give you an exact rate, but maybe 6, 7, 8%. So they're pretty similar to what you would find with a commercial lender with a typical bank. But the interesting thing about the way BII approaches lending and investing is, again, I said, not one size fits all. So it depends on what the organization's needs are. And I'll give you a few examples. We recently invested in, and this is public information, you can look it up on our website. We've been talking about it, in Colorful Resilience. They're an LGBT-owned, woman-owned organization that's providing mental health services to LGBTQ community. That's a primary focus. And they had funding. They had received loans from other lenders, including Common Capital, that's located in Springfield, Mass. And what we did with them is that we said to them, we're going to lend you this funding, which is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but we won't have you pay us back until you pay back your other lenders. So it's very patient capital. So it would be year 3 or year 4 where we will start collecting that back. If she is able to pay back her other lenders quickly, then we'll start getting paid back quicker. But that's in that situation. In other situations, we look at, using, if you are getting grants, to secure financing from us, because the grants are, you got a grant award letter and it's a lot of money, but you won't get that grant until, like, the beginning of the fiscal year, July 1st, but you need the monies now, it's April. You know, we would look at that as well. And in that sense, it will be more like a bridge financing short term. And so there's a lot of different ways to structure things. With us, nonprofits are a little bit different because the majority of funding typically comes from grants or donations. So but we still look at stability, at cash flow, and all of that, and we work a good plan with you. So, but if you want a straight answer, our interest rates are fairly competitive. We try not to. We don't want to be extractive, and we don't want to be cause a burden on the organization where they'll have issues paying us back. So it's a very interesting model. Let me tell you, not many people do it, but we're happy to be able to be pioneers in that area.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Bart has another question for Sarah as a follow-up, and about how you can be reached if they have a question about whether to apply for both arts and environment or just focus on one of those program areas.
Yeah, I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody. I'm going to put my email in the chat. I will say what we typically say is to, similar to what Vanessa said about, the mission statement in GuideStar is like we want to kind of get a sense of what your primary mission is. If your primary mission is like the arts, but you're also doing environment, or if you're really a 50-50 arts environment or organization, then we can discuss what makes the most sense. But we want to kind of lead with the primary thing as the kind of the category piece. But I'm happy to have that discussion with anybody if there's questions on our guidelines and how people fit.
Wonderful. Thank you. Oh, Miriam has raised her hand.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Karen. Thanks so much for having this Zoom meeting. My question is there any of you, I guess mostly Vanessa and Sarah, do anything about food insecurity? And if it is yes, for families, then I have a follow-up question.
The Homestead Foundation does do some food insecurity funding, yes.
Okay, then my second follow-up question is, because you are talking about you are giving grants to any organization under 3 million, something like that. I work for Goodwill Industries. Actually, our Goodwill is one of the smallest Goodwill in the whole country because our territory is so small and it has more land than more households. When I joined 14 years ago, we had a $1 million budget, and now we have 8 million because we have 7 stores. And out of that 8 million, 5.5 million of it is for providing payroll for 190 employees that we have. And then the rest of it is for our trucks that are leased and our buildings, 7 buildings that are leased. So as you can see, there's no money left. So when 2020 came, we really, because I'm still doing community development, I noticed that community needs food, more food, because most of the food pantries, they were using the volunteers to do the transportation, to go all the way to Western Massachusetts Food Bank and using their own car or renting a U-Haul. To make the long story short, I applied for a grant of CDBG grant, which was a federal grant, and I bought a Goodwill truck. This is the only truck that we do own, and that's because the money was available, and they gave it to us. So we have been, but this whole food insecurity is not related at all to any of our expenses from the stores or anything, because whatever we do at Goodwill, it has to cover Massachusetts and Vermont. And because of this grant, the food insecurity is only, I can make it work through writing grants or sponsorship. So the 8 million has nothing to do with how, that piece of it gets distributed, because for the last 5 years, we have delivered over 1,800,000 pounds of food to Western Massachusetts, to the Berkshire County. That's the first thing you said, you're going to go and look at our 990 and all of that. So most of the places I cannot even apply because the grant and the sponsorship, the cost of this program is close to 150,000, and it has nothing to do with 8 million. I cannot even touch that. So how do you go about that? I mean,
Yeah, I understand that's the frustration in that. I think that I certainly, as someone who's again worked in on the fundraising side and on the foundation side, I certainly understand how it feels unfair because it's not the same thing. I think that we had to draw some of those lines on our side because otherwise, I'm a part-time one staff person for an organization that, we would field thousands of applications if we kind of didn't have a couple hard lines in there. And it's not to say that the money would not be impactful for your group and for your like other organizations. Unfortunately, that's the thing about foundations is we have specific guidelines and um, uh, things that kind of barriers we put up just for our own kind of clerical sake in some ways. And, again, like that's people always say it's, must be nice to be the ones on the funding side, but it's hard to have to make sometimes these what feel like arbitrary lines, but are just things that we have to kind of put into place in order to do as much as we can. And so that's from our perspective, like we do kind of keep that line just to try to keep things really focused on organizations where we feel that our money can have the most impact, but that's not to say that it wouldn't have an impact other places that we obviously know that it's needed everywhere. It's just a line we have to draw for ourselves.
Yeah, and I guess I would add that on the other side of that coin, very large foundations often actually have the opposite kind of line in that they will only fund organizations. For example, I think it's the Hearst Foundation will only fund organizations that have over a $2 million a year budget. And that's because they don't want to be over a certain percentage of the nonprofit's budget. So I guess, Miriam, I will continue to make people aware of opportunities that will fit for them. And so there are some foundations who will be more suited to your situation because of your larger overall budget than the folks who are joining us today. So that's certainly been something fascinating to learn about how different foundations draw that line and why. Is anyone else have any other questions they would like to raise at this point? I don't see any hands up, but I don't want to just cut off the conversation either without checking. Oh, there's something new in the chat. Oh, just a thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. Everyone feel all set at this point? Or at least all set with our panel? Great. Well,
Thank you.
thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who was able to join. And thank you so much to our panelists who provided really insightful and very candid. I always appreciate how candid funders are willing to be when we all get together, because it certainly makes sure we all make the best use of our time and the best use of our resources. I'll just ask the panelists to stay on for just a few minutes once folks depart. And I just, again, thank you so much. Look forward to more workshops with all of you.
Thanks, everyone.